Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Hyde at Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg Technology.
And we are counting you down to the launch of Boeing's much-anticipated Starliner in Cape Canaveral. The crew of 2 will be the first astronauts to travel aboard the so-called space taxi. And this launch, look, it's been plagued by problems. Delayed twice already in the last month due to a number of technical glitches. The craft, key to NASA's plans to take crew to and from the International Space Station. A lot is riding on this, Ed.
Yeah, this has been 10 years in the making. Boeing's been working on Starliner since 2014 when NASA first awarded the contracts as part of the Commercial Crew Program. And it's massively behind schedule, 7 years delayed, $1.5 billion or more over budget, Caro. And we may finally be here. And the important context is that in that time, the contract was also awarded to SpaceX, who have flown NASA staff to the ISS 9 times and 4 private missions. And you can see how far behind Boeing has fallen.
Let's just talk about the people that we're seeing on board at the moment. Veterans, as we say, this will be both of their 3rd time going to the International Space Station. And what we've got, Suni Williams, Barry Butch Wilmore. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yes, Suni Williams, hugely experienced astronaut, 322 days in space, first time in 2006 through 7, second time 2012, a number of spacewalks. Butch Wilmore, 178 days in space. He will be the commander of this mission, been a pilot aboard previous missions, and it's a different system to SpaceX, right? It's a very different system. It has side boosters, a main booster, a second stage booster, and then the capsule Starliner on top. So there is a lot here that is not as tested as thoroughly as the SpaceX system, but we're getting closer to this happening, Kara, and I have to say I've been skeptical that we would get here given the multiple delays, even in the last month alone. But Starliner looks clear for launch.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying 2 American heroes, drawing a line to the stars for all of us.
Commander Butch Wilmore there, calling down to Mission Control here in Houston that the spacecraft has begun rolling into the right attitude for its ascent, and the Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer here in the room seeing good data on that.
Starliner passing through max Q, or the point of maximum dynamic pressure where the forces of air friction are highest, which in Sunny will shortly be passing through Mach 1, or the speed of sound.
We've passed through max Q, or the moment of maximum aerodynamic pressure or stress on the complete craft. 1.6 million pounds of thrust generated by the main booster, and on the side of that, the 2 solid rocket boosters. And that's the next thing that's going to happen, Caro. We're about 90 seconds into this, but at the 2-minute and 20-second mark, those solid rocket boosters, the 2 smaller boosters on the side, generating 348,000 pounds of thrust each, they will separate and drop off back to Earth, and we continue on our journey relying on that main booster for about 2 minutes or so, and we can pick up from there.
We, of course, are going to be keeping an eye on Starliner, but just talk to us also about United Launch Alliances here. They're, of course, providing the thrust, the rocket, and this is ultimately 2 working seamlessly together here.
This is a really important milestone because the Atlas V system has flown around 100 times, the majority of that under the ULA umbrella. And a lot of the setback is the integrated system, and I believe that what we just saw there was the separation of the solid rocket boosters, those two that dropped off of the side. But this is the first time that we've had some serious human space flight under the ULA umbrella with Atlas V, and it's part of a much bigger integrated system along with the Starliner capsule for which Boeing is responsible. Interesting, the share's up 0.3%. I'm not sure what you'd expect. Maybe a relief rally, maybe not, because of how many years behind schedule we are and how many billions of dollars over budget we are. But yeah, it's an important milestone for that combined system. But we add the context that in the meantime, since 2014, when NASA first awarded the dual contracts to SpaceX and Boeing, SpaceX has made this routine and done it many more times.
And let's just run through some of the differences here of what we're looking at compared to SpaceX in terms of the nuances of how the flight is approached, the fact that we're not seeing a reusable rocket here, and indeed, well, a very small amount of size differences.
Really excellent questions. I mean, they're very different launch systems. Falcon 9 has a fully reusable booster. There are ways that they're similar. So the total thrust at sea level of Falcon 9 is about 1.7 million pounds. The total combined system of CST-100 is about 1.6 million pounds of thrust. They will both travel at similar top speeds. So on its way to its next stages of separation, which I'll get to in a second, we're traveling maybe 17,500 miles per hour, similar to Falcon 9. Falcon 9 does not rely on those two additional side boosters or the two additional solid rocket boosters like the CST-100 system does. And then there are additional stages of separation. I'm flipping my bits of paper all over the place here because I want to make sure that we get this right. 4 minutes in, and the next key milestone is that the Atlas booster, that main booster, will cut off its engines, and from there, the Centaur, which is the secondary stage, will separate off from the main booster.
So ultimately we're waiting for that 4-minute 34 mark when we do see that separation. And as we can see thus far, 4 minutes 32 seconds in, Ed, this seems to be going smoothly and much to the release. Here we are. We can take a look. Ed, that was a separation, correct? That was the Atlas Centaur separation from what we understand. We're about 4 minutes and 50 seconds in.
Exactly. That's what is called Centaur, or basically the second stage booster pulling away from the main Atlas booster in a stage called BECO, or Atlas Booster Engine Cutoff. The next big sort of milestone is in about 10 minutes time, I'd say, which is where Starliner, the capsule sitting atop of Centaur, will separate on and send those two astronauts on their way. But it's just incredible, the images that we've seen. You know, space is hard, yes. You know, and Boeing has come in for a lot of criticism. It is $1.5 billion over budget, as we say. The stock now modestly lower, basically flat. But everything is nominal, as they say in the space industry. It's going to plan, and we finally got here.
We have, and space is hard, it's costly, and we want to go to someone who really understands the intricacies of trying to work with private and public integration of getting more humans to the International Space Station. Esene is with us, Esene Uzo-Okoro, for more. Senior Fellow at Harvard's Belfer Center, former White House Assistant Director for the Space Policy, former NASA Executive. Esene, I don't know who else would be more perfect on a day such as this to weigh in, and thus far this is going successfully. How important is this to the U.S. space ecosystem?
It is critically important. You know, what we're seeing here is American ingenuity, and the success of this launch so far indicates that we continue to lead as a nation, because we're no longer in a space race. Today, we've got over 90 space programs globally. And so continued leadership is important for the U.S. to keep our edge, to continue to pioneer. And this is just a beautiful sight, frankly.
Esene, you contributed in your career to dozens of different NASA missions. Since 2014, when NASA first awarded those contracts and the much bigger picture of the Commercial Crew Program, it's been super frustrating to see Boeing take 10 years to get to this point. SpaceX has pulled ahead massively. How will that have gone down inside of NASA? How is staff at the agency going to be viewing this moment?
There's a lot of celebration and a lot of relief, because what you're seeing here is the resilience of scientists and engineers over, as you mentioned, a decade. And one of the critical skills an engineer has is the ability to be disappointed for 3 seconds and then move on to find a solution to the next problem. And we witnessed it for this launch in particular over the last month. And that's what's happened over the last decade. And NASA is experienced at this because over 60 years of putting together missions and spacecraft, we've had our share of challenges. And so we understand, and we are frankly cheering Boeing on today.
I'm very humble of you to sort of outline some of the ways in which NASA feels its own issues. I just want to outline some of the concerns we had leading up to this particular launch. There was a pressure valve that was a concern with the ULA side of the equation, the rocket. We had a small helium leak that seems to have been deemed not a worry, and so therefore that helium leak didn't need to be fixed for this mission to continue. Then previously, we saw, of course, the whole mission was called off but 4 minutes before launch, and that was all based on a launch computer being somewhat delayed. There is so much intricacy when it comes to these sorts of humongous, very costly launches, SNA. And I want to understand from your perspective how important it is to have more private players in the game. How many more do we need than ultimately the duopoly we have at the moment?
As many as we can have. This is a very challenging business, and we continue to support lots of smaller companies, lots of rocket companies that are focused on launching smaller spacecraft into space. And there is a lot of exciting opportunities, not just in the US, but in other countries. And it's important because when we have launch become more ubiquitous, then the idea of space tourism becomes even accessible. And your children may one day, take a field trip to space because the opportunities to fly are available and accessible.
For our Bloomberg Technology audience, what we're looking at on our screen is a computer-generated image giving the approximate status of the Starliner capsule attached to the Stentor second stage booster. In about 5 minutes' time, those two will separate, and the Starliner capsule, SNA, will continue on its journey to the International Space Station, about a 24-hour process. The International Space Station makes me think a lot about the future. It's due to be decommissioned in 2030. And so today is a massive success. Credit to Boeing to finally achieve this as it stands, the stock down 0.4%. But it seems like the Starliner system has a limited shelf life. They might get, 6 missions before ISS is decommissioned or so. Do you see a future for Boeing in the passage of humans from Earth into orbit and beyond?
Yeah, so most companies don't share some of the research and development that they are currently working on while they are completing other complex missions. And as you notice, this is an effort that is combining, multiple companies, ULA, Boeing, and other thousands of smaller businesses and contractors who have helped to make this happen. And so with the retirement of the International Space Station in 2030, we are likely to see not just commercial US-owned space stations replace the International Space Station, but also increase commercial launch activity. So the space sector continues to be described as emerging as a technological space. However, what we've seen and what we've witnessed is that it takes sometimes 30 years to emerge. And so some of these companies continue to work on this, including Boeing, and they might surprise us with what they have in store for future commercial space stations.
SNA, your focus is often sustainability here, efficiency ultimately. How sustainable is Boeing ULA vis-a-vis what we see from SpaceX? How much do you think that ultimately sustainability can be achieved and a clean process of putting a whole ton of satellites into low Earth orbit as well?
Sustainability is a very tough challenge in space, and rightly so. Reusable rockets are more sustainable than a rocket with a single use. However, we have to think about the systems that are developed. If this has 6 flights in it, and after a development cycle that was at least 10 years long, getting at least 6 launches out of it is a helpful start to a future where we will, with hope, have an increased amount of reusable rockets. Now, with spacecraft and satellites in space, we have a whole slew of regulatory rules around when satellites can deorbit so that they don't end up as space debris or space junk. And so we have a process in place, and companies do help to mitigate and help to ensure that we have as little debris as possible in space while we try to clean up everything that's there currently.
Esne, I'd like to spend a moment thinking about the men and women of NASA, and particularly the control staff at the agency. What's kind of interesting about CST-100 is that it is NASA control teams that are running the mission alongside Boeing. You know, SpaceX has its own control teams. So for your former colleagues and friends at NASA, it's also been a very long journey for this system and project, even though we focus on the Boeing component of it. Just explain sort of the depth of talent and those colleagues you know that have worked on this project.
You've got people who have been at the agency for at least 2 decades, people who have worked in mission control for 3 decades. You've got people skilled in physics, in chemical engineering, in aerospace engineering, in a plethora of engineering disciplines who have time and time again supported even the shuttle program and are today supporting this Boeing Starliner. You've got colleagues who have helped to ensure that the International Space Station and the astronauts that visit it remain in constant communication with Houston and the ground. And you've got lots of NASA leaders who have been with the agency, some for almost 4 decades. So there is this continuity and resilience in engineering and leadership that we see at NASA today.
Esne, we're just about to start witnessing, I believe, a key moment. Starliner separation, is it, Ed, coming up?
Yeah, Starliner separation coming up, where the Starliner capsule separates from the Centaur second stage. That's probably happening as we speak, but as you can see on your screen, we're relying on a computer-generated image. So any second, there is your computer-generated representation. What timing that was. We planned that one. And before that, you had the Centaur main engine cutoff happen prior to it. There's a really important technological distinction, right, Kara, between what we're so used to with SpaceX and Falcon 9 and this CST-100 system, which is the only reusable part of CST-100 is the Starliner capsule. The secondary boosters, main booster Centaur, are not recoverable in the same way that the Falcon 9 booster is. But as I keep saying, and let's repeat it one final time, so far everything is nominal, meaning everything is normal. This is going to plan. Boeing stock's down 0.4% modestly, but it's now a 24-hour journey from this point to the International Space Station.
It is, and Esne, this is such, I'm sure, contained exuberance and euphoria going on in Cape Canaveral at the moment. But there is much to look forward to. Not only, of course, these, within the next 24-hour process, these 2 veteran astronauts arriving at the International Space Station, but you mentioned how maybe Ed and my children will be visiting these outer parts of space soon enough on a consumer basis. And I think to what's happening over the weekend, and Virgin Galactic, I think, is still planning for their next particular trip. Are you seeing things going as well as you'd like?
Yes, this is extremely challenging. We have to remember that astronauts have typically been Marines, the best of the best, and they train for at least a decade at NASA before they fly. And the fact that we can simplify that process to allow citizens and non-Marines and non-Air Force pilots and non-rocket scientists to fly and even conduct some experiments on some of these flights is really encouraging because as we continue, it reminds me of the first days of history and the first days of aviation. But as we continue to see these flights happen, then what we hope to see is, again, school field trips to a future private commercial space station or a trip around the Earth. And that is exciting to behold. I believe we will see that in this generation.
We're looking at your live shot right now, and we've been relying on sort of computer-generated images. It's interesting, or I observed that we don't have the sort of as reliable camera feed with Starliner and CST-100 as perhaps we do with Falcon 9. Even so, everything from the NASA feed tells us that we're nominal so far. Esne, we've really enjoyed having you with us on Bloomberg Technology for this launch. Just your parting thoughts on this moment, but I guess also whether or not it will be a catalyst for broader progress in commercial space beyond what we've relied on SpaceX to bring.
You know, the global significance of this is large. We have young engineers locally and nationally who will be inspired, but we also have rocket entrepreneurs who will be inspired in other nations to start their rocket programs and companies, to join space agencies and other countries who may decide this is the time to start their own space program. And so with this inspiring and exciting, successful feat, we can only hope to see more involvement globally. And what that means for the commercial space sector is more resources and a multiplication of capital and more interest in space from investors and others who are interested in technology writ large.
Over 60 NASA missions and programs you're involved with yourself, 20 years, of course, of US government service. Perfect guest to live through some of these incredible images that we see now of what's occurred with ULA and Boeing. Ezine Uzookoro, thank you for joining us, Senior Fellow at Harvard's Belfer Center. Meanwhile, let's get back to Earth. Let's look at what's happening with the markets. Very briefly, we're seeing, well, Boeing on the downside, but on the higher side is NASDAQ. Big tech leading the charge, up more than 1.2%. Some mixed data today. Services still showing really resilient U.S. economy, but maybe some cooling jobs market data helping feed a bond market rally that we see down 3 basis points on the 10-year. Important rate cut happening in Canada. The dollar is higher versus the loonie. We're currently up 0.25%. But Ed, dig into individual stocks for us.
Yeah, earnings are a big part of the story. CrowdStrike beating in the quarter, really bucking the trend of a pullback in cyber spending, one of the beneficiaries of Microsoft missing the mark there. And then HPE surging. There's a clear tailwind from AI infrastructure build out. We've talked about this a lot. It's not just the chips, but it is the casing and the rest of the server components, which HPE is a contributor to. Those names. Wow. That was fabulous. I really enjoyed doing that with you, Caroline. What a moment in commercial space flight. We'll be right back. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has won crucial backing from 2 key allies in his coalition, allowing him to form a government and extend his decade in power. Joining us now is Jayant Krishna, a non-resident senior fellow at the chair in US-India Policy Studies over at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And Jayant, what maybe will have to change in the next government under Modi is perhaps more of an equal distribution of economic progress, particularly when it comes to the jobs market. And I'm interested as to whether technology will be a solve for that in some way.
Yeah, I would reckon so. See, this is going to be a coalition government because the BJP, which is led by the Prime Minister Modi, has not got a majority of its own. They have got 293 seats along with other partners which contested the elections together. And the opposition alliance has got 232 seats. So it's not a clear majority. It's going to be it's a return of the country to coalition politics. Many would think that, technology decisions, business decisions, reforms would get slowed down. But that may not not be the case all the time. If you look at the history of Indian politics, the coalition governments have delivered better on reforms. The most transformative reforms, if you look at, which have happened since the last 76 years when India became independent, have been in the year 1991 when the government, it was a minority government actually, not even a coalition government, headed by the Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, with Dr. Manmohan Singh, the former Prime Minister who was the finance minister, and when the economic reforms happened in the country. So those have been the most transformative reforms. But I think most of the coalition governments have delivered better actually on the reforms process and have met the business expectations better, contrary to the popular belief.
So we've just been carrying Boeing's mission on CST-100 into space. I think we're going to get to India's space ambitions. We've reflected on this program about Modi's open arms to those working on artificial intelligence. But he ran on a business-friendly policy platform, right? In the coalition scenario, is he going to be able to carry through with that as he would otherwise have done were he to have a majority himself?
So I would believe so. If you look at the Prime Minister Modi's party, BJP's election manifesto, they've talked about many things. They've talked about artificial intelligence mission, the AI mission. They've talked about having a national quantum mission. Since you're talking about space, they've talked about the first human space flight mission that government is voted to power, and they have been voted to power, although with a thinner majority, they're going to embark upon. They've also talked about having an Indian astronaut on moon, and the Prime Minister has been very upbeat about, the space mission. If you look at the American company SpaceX, their parlays with the Indian government, there have been some changes in the FDI policy, the foreign direct investment policy to accommodate, the genuine business aspirations. So I would feel that, there's a huge amount of focus in several areas, defense technologies, semiconductors, space, telecom, and various sectors. There's a huge amount of, and I don't think that's slowing down at all with a coalition government vis-a-vis a government having a majority of its own.
Jayant, just briefly, we talk about India a lot in the context of homegrown big technology services companies, but largely big companies coming to India to invest. What about the venture capital ecosystem? What about startup culture? Is that going to be flourishing under the new government, do you think?
See, one thing is very clear. Whichever government comes to power in India, there is a certain continuity in the economy, in the reforms process, in being friendly to the business community and so on and so forth. I don't see that slowing down, at all. So I think, there are several sectors. If you look at defense itself. So one difference is India should no longer be seen as a low cost back office destination.
Right.
I think major financial powers all over the world have to look at co-developing and co-producing with India. I think that is gone are the days when you give components to us, we assemble it, leveraging our cheaper manpower and deliver. I think we have to have a role in the development process, in the research and development space, and then co-manufacture. Okay. I think that is going to be a genuine win-win between developed countries like the US and India. That's what I would feel.
Jayant Krishna of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. An important conversation on India. Thank you.
Intel has just agreed to sell a 49% equity interest in a plant it's building in Ireland to Apollo Global Management, $11 billion. Intel will have a 51% controlling interest in the joint venture and will retain full ownership and operational control of it. But Bloomberg's Danny Berger sat down with Apollo co-president Scott Kleinman on the sidelines of the Super Return private equity event in Berlin to ask him about it.
I think you're going to see more and more of this coming.
More from Apollo?
Absolutely more from Apollo, but in general, just the need for this type of capital is insatiable.
Okay, that was the finance side. Let's get the chip side with Bloomberg's Ian King. Look, this is core to Pat Gelsinger's plan of smart capital. Intel's money, the government's money, and then someone else's money to achieve a transformation.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing in what you just said is Intel's money, and the simple fact is Intel doesn't have that much money anymore. It has more than $50 billion in debt. It has negative free cash flow, and as we've seen, its earnings have been under pressure. So it needs external capital to protect that balance sheet as much as it can, hence arrangements like this.
It's interesting, Ian, that we've seen other interesting relationships being born. You've got NXP, of course, chip maker over in Europe, teaming up with TSMC to be building out in Singapore. Are we just going to have to see more coming together of capital and alliances like this because it's so expensive?
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I mean, these things, this is not a hobby, right? I mean, these things cost, a plant can cost $20 billion and its useful life is not that long, right? A bit like me, right? 5 years and it's gone, right? You need to put a lot of money into this.
And, need more money into Ian King.
Yeah. No, I mean, the cost of capital is really important when you're in an expansionist phase like Intel is in right now. And, Gelsinger has a lot of pressure on him on all sides, so he's absolutely going to have to do more of this kind of thing.
And the customer base, Ian, have we heard any more in terms of orders of these future, supplies being made?
Yeah, no, and again, that's the big question, right? We need a big customer. We need an NVIDIA. We need even an AMD to say, hey, Intel, we want to give you orders for all of these brand new factories that you're investing in, for all of this great new manufacturing that you're putting in place. So far, we haven't heard that. Intel's explanation is, well, they don't want us to talk about it, but trust me, we've got plenty lined up, and at the moment, the market is kind of in a wait-and-see mode on that one.
You say we need an NVIDIA. It's so important to be crystal clear about what Intel's talking about. He's talking about customers so it can be a contract manufacturer for them. And at the same time, Gelsinger wants them to have their products be at the cutting edge, the ones that they offer for PC data center. How do you pull off both?
Exactly, and that's a tension that is at the heart of this project, right? This is a company that has been brutally competitive for multiple decades, that has made every other company out there suffer in its wake, and now it's saying, hey guys, give us your best stuff, we'll make it for you.
Bloomberg's Ian King, who leads our semiconductor coverage here at Bloomberg Technology, and Intel continuing to be in the news headlines on all sides of this business, the foundry or fab, and then the product side as well. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Caroline Hyde in New York. Quick check on these markets for you, because we are up and away when you're looking at the NASDAQ today. We're currently still up more than a percentage point, 1.4% on the NASDAQ 100 as well. Big tech managing to lead a charge amid some mixed economic data. Slight cooling of the jobs market, which probably helps demand for bonds at the moment. Yields coming down. Will we see the Fed able to cut later into the year? We're off by 4 basis points. 4.28 is where we trade on the 10-year. But still resilient services sector and business activity here in the United States. Bitcoin on the up, 1.6%. Look, we're at that 71,000 level. If we eclipse the 72,000, we go to yet more record highs. Well, we heard, of course, from some of the key players at Galaxy Digital yesterday saying that we could be at $100,000 by the end of the year. Move on, have a look at what's happening on the micro, the individual names that are on the move. I shine a light on sort of an AI theme and indeed a chip theme as well. We stick with it. ASML, there's of course a Dutch company trading here in the US in terms of its ADRs, but also over in Europe on the higher side of more than 7%. This is we see that, yes, it will be delivering its latest equipment making facilities over to TSMC. We knew Intel had already taken delivery in Oregon in December. Then we want to see the latest versions of their chip equipment being shipped over to TSMC. That pushes us higher. Cisco, though, just at an investor event, and analysts are kind of mixed on basically this is a show me story, a tell me story, a still long-term investment coming from Cisco to ensure that they are the networking gear of choice when it comes to getting in the likes of focus on AI particularly. We're down 2.8%. Some worries about how much really AI will add to their overall profitability in the here and now. And I want to talk about AI adding to profitability and revenue in the here and now, because boy is it helping HPE. We're up 11% after its numbers came out. And Ed, this is clearly a sign of revenue returning to growth for the quarter. We're also seeing, of course, the idea that AI systems is where we're really seeing almost $1 billion in revenue being done on a quarter. The fact that they're tripling their enterprise AI customer base, but we want to see how much margin is coming out of that, Ed, too.
I think that's exactly the focus of the market this morning. Luckily, joining us to discuss is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise CEO Antonio Neri. I look at HPE and the stock performance, and you're not getting the credit that Dell is or Supermicro. I see Jensen Huang pat Michael Dell on the back and say, if you need a scalable server solution, you phone Michael Dell. But your margins are better. Are you finally starting to get some credit for the role you're playing in the AI infrastructure build-out?
Well, good morning, Ed and Caroline. Great to be here with you today. I completely agree with you that HP is not getting the due credit for the potential of what we do for AI and the results we have been delivering, including this past quarter. So when we think about our quarters, number one, we beat revenue and we beat EPS, non-GAAP EPS, and that was all driven by the AI system revenue conversion. To your point, Caroline made, almost $1 billion. We exceeded $900 million. And we have a terrific pipeline, which is a multiples of the current backlog. And now we start seeing the uptick in enterprise, which obviously HP has a significant presence. But the reality is that we have unique capabilities. When I think about the capabilities HP has in this particular inflection point, AI, number one, we know how to run AI at scale. We have done it for decades. It has been more than a supercomputer now in generative AI. And that comes on the back of our unique expertise in IP, intellectual property. So we know how to build these systems, how to cool it. And then we have a unique manufacturing footprint for water cooling. As we think about the next generation of silicon, we require 100% of liquid cooling. And HP is one of those companies who can do it all. And then last but not least is the services piece. And when you talk about profitability of AI, we think about as a complete pull-through. It's not just the infrastructure side, it's also the services side. And we had a very solid margin performance in our AI systems, which is part of the server segment, where we deliver 18% growth year over year, and we deliver an 11% operating profit. In the guidance, we provide 11 to 13%.
Your CFO talking about prudent cost discipline. Is that what helps with the margin as well, Antonio? Because, look, let's call out JP Morgan, the analysts over there this morning, saying the results in the outlook echoed a similar AI server story of revenue with limited margins. They're not hearing you on the fact that you've got stronger margins.
I think it's a combination of three unique things, Caroline. Number one is prudent business discipline. We have been, on that journey for a long time. We pursue deals that we can add value, that we see path to profitability, and that we can drive pull-through. That's number one. Number two is our complete portfolio. And so one of the key areas that I think the market doesn't understand is that we don't just ship servers. We actually ship the server, we install it, and in many cases, we run it as a part of our HP GreenLake platform. And that includes an enormous amount of services. That's why you see HP GreenLake also growing rapidly. And the fastest growing area of HP GreenLake this past quarter, which grew 39% year over year, is actually AI. And last but not least is our ongoing brutal management of cost across the company. And also we are now deploying AI in our own company.
That's interesting. So you're deploying within your company, generative AI, I'm sure, but who's coming to you? Who are the clients? Because I'm actually surprised that where else have you been focusing if it's not enterprise?
Well, I think about AI in three unique segments. Number one, obviously, is what I call the model builders. These are the people who are building the models and need an enormous amount of accelerated compute to train the models, from hundreds of billions of parameters to now obviously 1 trillion plus parameters. And in that, we also mentioned yesterday that Microsoft is extending the Azure AI cloud to HP infrastructure and to serve the clients. And one of the clients just happened to be OpenAI. So that's a great example of it. But there's also other service providers like Scalewell in France and many others we support. That's one segment. And obviously that's where a lot of the demand has been. The second segment, which is growing now, is actually sovereign cloud. And the third is enterprise.
Antonio, there is an interesting tension happening in your industry and with your partners. Lisa Su and AMD and Jensen and NVIDIA principally have the GPUs and CPUs, right? But they want to be systems vendors. And so in the context of a server, there's not a lot left over after that. But they don't have the experience in the sales channels that you guys operate in. businesses big and small, enterprise. How are you able to convince your investors that you can all grow together when you know that the biggest partners on the tech side want to do more stuff themselves?
Yeah, and we have obviously decades of experience in doing so. I think it's multiple things. Number one, obviously, we work with them to make sure their IP with our IP deliver a better experience and a better performance. And so we co-engineer a lot of things, and going to see here with NVIDIA in particular at HP Discover in Las Vegas, an enormous amount of innovation we're bringing to the market. So I hope you can join us and take a look at that. But also with AMD, obviously, we have long-standing relationship. In fact, some of the large supercomputers with the Department of Energy has been built together with AMD. What we will bring is the infrastructure expertise. So it's not just the silicon built in a server, and you and I were chatting before the call. It's actually about the whole infrastructure. And in that, now we have unique IP when it comes down to air-cooled, mixed cooling, and direct liquid cooling. That's very hard to do. Second piece, you need the manufacturing capability to do so. HP today has one of the largest water-cooled manufacturing footprint in the world.
Okay.
And as you follow the roadmap, that will be necessary. And last but not least, obviously, is the services piece, because this system requires a lot of maintenance and a lot of kind of TLC, if you will, and HP knows how to do that at scale.
So Antonio, Jensen Huang will be on stage with you and he'll give you a public endorsement. Is that right?
No, I think what's going to happen is Jensen and I are super excited to announce solutions together that will advance the adoption of these amazing technologies. And obviously, that's where the two companies come together, but also doing it in a spectacular venue, which will be at the Sphere. And so the way we're going to showcase all that innovation is going to be very engaging and I think, the first of a kind.
Ed's been spending some time in Las Vegas, going again. Hewlett Packard Enterprise CEO Antonio Neri. It's great to have you with us today. Thanks for joining on the earnings. Meanwhile, coming up, we're going to talk about the private side of investment right now. Ken Elephant's with us. He's partner at Sorensen Capital for today's VC Spotlight. That's next. This is Bloomberg Technology.
The biggest thing we're going to see in our lifetime from today will be the picks and shovels driving AI, and that's around the data center space. Go figure out how to get exposure to hyperscalers, which we think will be the biggest winner in what AI and data storage will do for the world.
He manages the money of the tech billionaire's iconic founding partner, Devesh Makhan, speaking with David Rubenstein on this week's Bloomberg Wealth episode about some of those AI investing opportunities. Let's just dig into how AI is changing everyone's landscape for VC investing. VC Spotlight with Ken Elephant, partner at Sorensen Capital. Ken, I imagine even in the focus area that you have in cyber, it's all about generative AI.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Yes, as you said before the break, I'm a partner here at Sorensen Capital. We're an early stage and growth stage venture capital firm with over $1.5 billion of assets under management. We focus on investing in enterprise software, and I focus on the cybersecurity part of that. So AI is a big theme, like you mentioned, and certainly in security, AI is an important aspect. There's really two areas where AI can be applied in security. The first is that AI needs to be used inside of security products. So imagine today, most enterprises have a security operations center. What happens is you have a network security person, you have a host security person, you have a cloud security person, and all these people need to work very closely together to stop attacks. AI can be used to really leverage all of the information, make it a lot quicker to respond to these alerts. So that's one way. Yeah.
The thing that I've struggled to understand for a few weeks now, for venture capitalists that invest in the cybersecurity space at the early stage, is what's missing out there. There's so many cybersecurity companies. We just talked about CrowdStrike doing well in an environment where cyber spending is down. So what is it specifically you're looking for?
Yeah, great question. So there's two theses that we have at Sorensen in terms of investing in security startups. One is we like to invest in terms of where the puck is going. And the other is we like to invest in companies where we think the legacy vendors are not innovating. So let's talk about where the puck is going. We have two recent exits in our portfolio. The first one is a company called Talon Security.
Yeah.
They invented the secure browser that was acquired by Palo Alto Networks for about $625 million. The reason this was important is because work was changing inside the enterprise. Employees were accessing applications and data through the browser, and the browser was unsafe.
Yeah.
And this is a huge problem when you're working on unmanaged devices like your tablets or your personal device at home. So that is an area that is brand new. It's an open space, and it really fit well with Palo Alto because Palo Alto is really good on their secure edge solution.
Ken, I believe as well, Zscaler acquired AirGap as well. So you've had these two M&A exits, which are really interesting. Is it all about M&A at the moment in terms of exits, given where the public markets are at the moment?
What we try and do here at Sorensen Capital is build companies that are long-term sustainable companies. And if you're solving a problem, you're going to get many acquisition offers along the way. And in this case, the acquisition offers were a really, really good win-win fit. And to your question about AirGap, what AirGap does is it was acquired by Zscaler in April, and the founders saw that unfortunately enterprises are going to get breached. I mean, we saw that today with TikTok, right? When you get breached, that is a problem. But the biggest problem is when that ransomware or malware moves from system to system inside the enterprise. That's called east-west traffic. Now, this was a really good fit for Zscaler because Zscaler is really good at north-south traffic, meaning protecting traffic that's coming outside the enterprise into the enterprise. So there's always going to be these security gaps in platform companies that our startups are really well positioned to help fill. And we can fill it through partnerships or in some cases acquisitions and in some cases IPOs. And as you know, better than I do, to go public, you need to have really good, repeatable earnings and revenue growth.
Sorensen Capital partner Ken Elephant on a subject that is top of mind for a lot of our audience around the world. Thank you. It is time for Talking Tech, and first up, eBay is dropping American Express cards as a payment option due to, quote, unacceptably high fees. The two companies have been embroiled in negotiations around the fees charged with American Express, stating that the fees were comparable to its competitors. The change is set to take effect August 17th. This one we talked about earlier, NXP Semiconductors is teaming up with a company partly owned by TSMC to build out a $7.8 billion chip plant in Singapore. The move comes as customers demand diversification amid geopolitical tensions. Construction of the facility is set to begin in the second half of this year, with production starting in 2027. And Alphabet has named Anat Ashkenazi as its new CFO. Ashkenazi spent 23 years at Eli Lilly, where she served as CFO and executive VP for the drug maker since 2021. She replaces Ruth Porat, who announced her departure last year. Ashkenazi's new role will be effective July 31st. Caroline.
Let's get more on the announcement. Davey Alba joins us, helping give the context of the news. And it was a long baton handing over that was the process going.
Yes. This process took quite a while, almost a year. So Ruth Porat announced that she was stepping down as Alphabet CFO in July 2023. And we've been waiting for her replacement, and it's finally been announced. I think this is a great pick for Alphabet. it gives them some credibility and boosts them, particularly in the healthcare industry, where there are many generative AI applications that are possible.
Let's just think about, exactly. She's coming from Eli Lilly, now the most valuable pharmaceuticals company out there. The applications are clear from healthcare. What else can she bring to the table from an Eli Lilly? There must be sort of an R&D for an investment ideal here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Alphabet has really shifted its focus and turned to generative AI as its mission and the thing that it's pouring its investments into. But as it's done that, it has also kind of let some of its moonshot healthcare efforts languish a little bit. And I think that enough Anat can bring, some revitalization to those efforts. So we'll see how it goes.
Hey, Davey, it's Ed. As you know, every quarter for the last year, I got to ask Ruth Porat when they would have a new CFO. And each quarter, she would also point out, she's doing other stuff, while they're looking for a new CFO. She's technically been president and chief investment officer. And in that time, Alphabet's done really well, with Porat still there. What do we know about the kind of big picture plan for her and what she's going to be focused on or where she's going?
Yeah, well, Ruth Porat is a pretty legendary figure in the tech industry. She oversaw Alphabet's restructuring when Google blew up its corporate structure and created these tiny companies under Alphabet. And she's also grown the company in its cloud and YouTube businesses in particular. They're a force to be reckoned with at this point, and Alphabet says that they will have a combined annual run rate of 100 billion by the end of this year. She's also been overseeing the other bets sector of the company and sort of pushing the company to sort of enact greater fiscal responsibility. So yes. I think we'll see more of that from her, and she will very likely work hand in hand with Anat to make the company even more successful as it turns to generative.
I find that super interesting because you're absolutely right, fiscal responsibility, discipline, but also give everything that Alphabet needs on the AI side, which was largely data center growth, infrastructure spend. Maybe that's an area that Anat Ashkenazi doesn't know as well. The Google Cloud portion of the business she needs to get to grips with.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Ruth has really proven herself through her track record of being able to sort of responsibly allocate resources. And generative AI, as you point out, is an incredibly expensive endeavor. So Alphabet is really in the top tier of companies that are competing for talent and also need to continue to invest resources into data centers and other tech infrastructure. So I think we'll see some of that from Ruth as well.
I love the quote in your story coming from the Mizuho analyst saying that this gig is probably one of the best in corporate America, so don't question why she's leaving one rocket ship that is Eli Lilly to go to Google. I just want to for a moment, I hate to shine a light on it, but there are a lot of really great female CFOs in the tech sector. I just think about Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA. So many of these juggernauts have females in the finance role.
Yeah, it's a welcome development, especially for an industry that has struggled with diversity issues and highlighting top female leaders over many years. So, I think this is a pretty good choice for Alphabet, and we'll see how it goes. She has big shoes to fill here.
She does. And the shoes remain on campus too, which is kind of interesting how that dynamic will play out. But some female shoes. Davey Alba, thanks for breaking it all down. That does it, though, for this edition of Bloomberg Technology, Ed. What a show.
What a show. What a moment for Boeing, for American space exploration. Recap everything on the pod. You know exactly where to find the podcast. What an honor that was. This is Bloomberg Technology.